Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2, the show where I read portions of the Tanakh and then provide my own interpretations of what I think it all means. Currently, we are in the book of Joshua, and today's episode lands on the 22nd of Cheshvan, 5785, November 23rd, 2024, coinciding with Parashat Chayei. You can check out more of that with my episode from last year on this particular parashah. But for now, let's go ahead and jump right on in and learn some more about the book of Yehoshua, or Joshua. Now, where we left off last time, they were in the process of conquering, as always, and then were also, they had formed a pact of sorts with the people of Gibeon, but aside from that, everybody else is kind of in a panic. So, anyhow, recap aside, we're going to start with chapter 10 and go up through chapter 12. As we go on, I'd like to remind everybody I'm not a professional scripture scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the scripture. My text is coming from Chabad.org in English if you'd like to follow along. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in. Chapter 10 of Yehoshua. Verse 1. And it came to pass, when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai, and had completely destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so had he done to Ai and her king, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel, and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all her men were mighty. And Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, and to Piram, king of Jarmuth, and Japhia, king of Lachish, and to Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up to me, and help me, and we will smite Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. And the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, gathered together and went up, they and all their camps encamped on Gibeon, and made war against it. And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua to the camp, to Gilgal, saying, Do not slack your hands from your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us, and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered against us together. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, Do not fear them, for I have delivered them into your hand. Not a man of them shall stand before you. And Joshua came to them suddenly. He had gone up from Gilgal all night. And the Lord confused them before Israel, and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon. And they chased them by the way that goes up to Beth-horon, and smote them to Azekah and to Makkedah. And it was as they fled from before Israel, and were in the descent of Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them to Azekah, and they died. There were more who died with the hailstones than whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still upon Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Yashar, which is the Torah? So the sun stood still in the midst of the heaven, and it did not hasten to go down exactly a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened to the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp to Gilgal. And these 5 kings fled and hid themselves at a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua was told, saying, The 5 kings have been found hidden in a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua said, Roll great stones to the mouth of the cave, and appoint men by it to guard them. And don't you stay. Pursue your enemies, and smite the hindmost of them. Do not let them enter their cities, for the Lord your God has delivered them into your hand. And it was when Joshua and the children of Israel had made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter, until they were consumed, that the rest which remained of them entered the fortified cities. And all the people returned to the camp to Joshua to Makkedah in peace. None wetted his tongue against any of the children of Israel. And Joshua said, Open the mouth of the cave, and bring out those 5 kings to me from that cave. And they did so. And they brought forth those 5 kings to him from the cave, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Yarmut, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. And it was when they brought out those kings to Joshua that Joshua called for all the men of Israel, and said to the chiefs of the men of war that went with him, Come near, put your feet upon the necks of these kings. And they came near, and put their feet upon their necks. And Joshua said to them, Fear not, nor be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage. For thus shall the Lord do to all your enemies against whom you fight. And afterward Joshua smote them, and slew them, and hanged them on 5 poles, and they were hanging upon the poles until evening. And it was at the time of the setting of the sun that Joshua commanded, and they took them down off the poles, and cast them into the cave wherein they had been hidden, and laid great stones on the mouth of the cave until this very day. And on that day Joshua took Makkedah and smote it with the edge of the sword, and its king he utterly destroyed, them and all the souls that were therein. He let none remain, and he did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. And Joshua passed on from Makkedah, and all Israel with him, to Libnah, and he fought against Libnah. And the Lord delivered it also, and its king, into the hand of Israel. And he smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were therein. He let none remain in it. He did it to its king, as he had done to the king of Jericho. And Joshua passed on from Libnah, and all Israel with him, to Lachish, and encamped against it, and fought against it. And the Lord delivered Lachish into the hand of Israel, and he took it on the 2nd day, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were in it, according to all that he had done to Libnah. Then Horam king of Gezer came up to help Lachish, and Joshua smote him and his people until he left him none remaining. And from Lachish Joshua passed on to Eglon, and with all Israel with him. And they encamped against it and fought against it. And they took it on that day, and smote it with the edge of the sword. And all the souls that were in it he completely destroyed that day, according to all that he had done to Lachish. And Joshua went up from Eglon, and all Israel with him, to Hebron, and they fought against it. And they took it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and its king, and all its cities, and all the souls that were in it, and he left none remaining, according to all that he had done to Eglon, but destroyed it completely, and all the souls that were in it. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to Debir, and he fought against it. And he took it and its king, and all the cities thereof, and they smote them with the edge of the sword, and completely destroyed all the souls that were in it. He left none remaining. As he had done to Hebron, so he did to Debir, and to its king, as he had done also to Libnah, and to her king. And Joshua smote all the country of the hills, and of the south, and of the valley, and of the falls, and all their kings. He left none remaining, but destroyed every soul, as the Lord God of Israel had commanded. And Joshua smote them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and all the land of Goshen to Gibeon. And all these kings and their land did Joshua take at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp to Gilgal. Wow. So chapter 10 is a bloodbath. So it starts off, the king of Jerusalem overhears what happened over at the city of Ai, just as it happened to Jericho. He forms the plan, let's build a coalition that's going to fight Israel and fight to defend ourselves. It doesn't work. In what is described as a day that stood still, where the sun and the moon froze in the sky so that the day did not turn to night, until they slaughtered everybody. A lot of two big miracles, well, really 3 miracles happen here. The first is, of course, that Joshua and the Israelites are able to actually take on 5 different enemies at once that are united against them. No problem. Second thing that's a miracle is that Joshua directly appeals to God to make that happen. But now that I'm going into this, I realize I've gotten a little ahead of myself and out of order, because Israel did not start this fight, nor were they the first combatants. Rather, it was the city Gibeon, the people of Gibeon, who were the first ones to be attacked. The rationale was, hey, those Gibeonites just formed an alliance with Israel, and on top of that, they're even bigger than these other people. If we don't destroy Gibeon, we're done for, because they're strong. So Gibeon, in their wisdom, instead of just going to war, they go to Israel. They go to Joshua and say, these enemies are attacking us who are your servants, remember? So go defend us. And Joshua's like, well, yeah, I agree with that. That actually makes sense. So that's why Israel got involved. But what's also interesting here is that it was a swift, decisive attack. It says that he went through the night. So Joshua went with this army overnight, marched straight into the battlefield, certainly overwhelmed the enemy that wasn't expecting them. They start running away. That's when we get the miracle of the sun standing over the sky, because another incredible thing happens during this war, and that is that not only do they kill people with the sword, but as they're fleeing, God steps in and brings down a hailstorm of stones. We could call this like a meteor shower on to the running away army. And it says more people were killed by the stones falling from the sky than from the actual warfare. In other words, this war was sanctioned and supported by God of Israel, number one, all-powerful. And he personally stepped in and destroyed these people. Now, this would be comparable to launching catapults into a crowd, but it's described as being a hailstorm. Do we want to be literal? Well, for the sake of mysticism, yes, we do. So meteors came out of the sky and destroyed this army more than the actual Israelite army did with their swords. So Joshua said, do not fear them about the kings, right? The 5 kings realize, boy, we just lost this war. Time to hide in a cave somewhere. They find them. And now that they've found them in that cave, they keep them pinned there, destroy their army, then come back for the kings later. And what does Joshua do? He has the chiefs of all the different tribes of Israel, so he has all the war chiefs come forward, and he says, put your foot on their neck. Go ahead. Just walk on up. Put your foot on the neck of these kings that we've captured. I'm going to tell you why you're doing that. This is a metaphor. Just as these 5 kings were delivered to your heel, so will all the others that we have to defeat. So don't be afraid. God will put every enemy under your heel. And then after he finishes this demonstration of the Israelite chiefs putting their feet on top of the necks of the enemy kings, he then kills them by hanging. And at the end of the long day, it's all said and done. So this has been an absolutely wild whiplash ride of just a massacre. And again, the majority of the massacre was not even the Israelites with their swords, but God with meteors, with stones falling from the sky. That is wild. That is a miracle. You know, we have similar things happen with the plagues in Egypt when they have the hailfire come down and destroy the crops. Well, here we see in Israel, these people have been destroyed by stones as well, falling from the sky. Very scary. So, nevertheless, they succeed in doing this, and also everybody, when they come back, it notes that when they return to camp, no one had wetted his tongue against any of the children of Israel. So, in other words, everybody who survived this, and it was all done, Joshua and the children of Israel put an end to it all. The rest which remained of them entered the fortified cities, right? So the survivors went to the cities, but it will not last because these cities are going to be destroyed, wiped out one by one. Joshua goes on a total conquest spree. Now, again, we have to really think about ancient pitched battles because the miracle of this, it describes these things being taken in a matter of days, if not one day. This is unrealistic in any contemporary sense if we look at the other military mights, unless they were just sweeping them so decisively. But you're dealing with usually fortified cities. How do you take everybody so fast? Well, that's the power of God. We don't get the exact tactics that were employed. It just says Joshua went here, and then they took that city. Joshua went there, they took the other city. Over and over and over again. Allies show up to help. He takes them out too. It does not matter how hard they fight. The Lord God of Israel is there. And that means nobody stands a chance. And so, as it says, all the country of the hills and the south, the valley, the falls, and all their kings, nothing remaining, from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and all the land of Goshen to Gibeon. He wiped them all out. All the kings were taken at once because Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. Powerful. All right, let's go ahead and move on to chapter 11. And it was when Yabin, king of Hazor, heard, he sent to Yobab, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron, to the king of Achshaph. And to the kings that were on the north of the mountains, and of the plains south of Chinarot, and in the valley, and in the regions of Dor on the west, to the Canaanite on the east and on the west, and to the Amorite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Jebusite in the mountain, and to the Hivite under the Hermon in the land of Mizpah. And they went out, they and all their hosts with them, many people, as the sand that is upon the seashore in multitude, with many horses and chariots. And all these kings met together. They came and camped together at the waters of Merom to fight with Israel. And the Lord said to Joshua, Be not afraid of them, for tomorrow at this time I will deliver them up all slain before Israel. You shall cripple their horses, and burn their chariots with fire. And Joshua and all the people of war with him came upon them by the waters of Merom suddenly, and they fell upon them. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel, and they smote them, and chased them to great Zidon, and to Misrepot Maim, and to the valley of Mizpeh eastward, and they smote them until they left them none remaining. And Joshua did to them as the Lord had bidden him. He crippled their horses and burnt their chariots with fire. And Joshua turned back at that time, and took Hazor, and smote its king with the sword, for Hazor was formerly the head of all these kingdoms. And they smote all the souls that were therein with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was not a soul left. And he burnt Hazor with fire. And all the cities of these kings and all their kings Joshua took and smote them with the edge of the sword, and he utterly destroyed them as Moses the servant of the Lord had commanded. But all the cities that stood in their strength Israel burned none of them, save Hazor only did Joshua burn. And all the spoil of these cities and the cattle the children of Israel took for a prey to themselves. But every man they smote with the edge of the sword until they destroyed them. They did not leave over a soul. As the Lord commanded Moses his servant, so did Moses command Joshua, and so did Joshua. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. And Joshua took all this land, the hills and all the south country, and all the land of Goshen, and the valley and the plain, and the mountain of Israel and its valley, from the divided smooth mount that goes up to Seir, to Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon under Mount Hermon. And all their kings he took and smote them and put them to death. Joshua made war a long time with all these kings. There was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel, save the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. They took all in battle. For it was from the Lord to harden their hearts that they should come against Israel in battle, that they might destroy them completely, and that they might have no favor, that they might destroy them as the Lord had commanded Moses. And at that time Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron to Debir, from Anab, and from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them completely with their cities. And there was no Anakim left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in the Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod they remained. And Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war. End of chapter 11. So here we have a continuation of Joshua going to war. The king of Hazor, named Yabin, hears about what's going on, and he sends word to several other kings, and they basically form another alliance, and they say, we're going to work together, and we're going to stop this Israel threat. We're going to put an end to the Israel menace once and for all. They form their coalition. They gather at this, by the water of Mizpah, and as they are spending the waters of Merom, they are encamped there. Now, while this is going on, God gives counsel to Joshua and says, I am going to deliver these people to you by tomorrow. And when you get them, you're going to cripple their horses and burn their chariots. So what does Joshua do? Another lightning strike in the middle of the night. They go and attack, and they smite these people decisively. Now, it's interesting because there are a couple of times now Joshua has chosen to move at night. So it's interesting because, you might ask the question of how do they get there by night? How do they do this? Whatever the case may be, Joshua seems to really favor this stratagem. Now, if we look at this historically, I'll bring back a reference to Abraham. When he was rescuing Lot, I do believe something similar took place. They moved quickly and dispatched the enemy, just overtook them. So, really incredible stuff. But here we see this strategy of attacking swiftly, decisively, even if it's the middle of the night, and they put an end to these people. As they're there, the Lord, it says, puts them into a daze, right? They are confused, so they just don't know what to do. They're completely at a loss. They are fighting, and losing to the Israelites. And they getting confused and put in a daze might have actually been the previous battle, but we're seeing a pattern here. God is making this very easy for Israel to just keep on steamrolling everybody. So what happens here is now they go from city to city and start conquering the cities themselves after this battle. Hazor is the only city that they burn. Now the question might be why. Well, this was the head of the different cities in this coalition, so that seems to be the reason. The rest of it is taken as tribute. Now another thing, it says every man they smote with the edge of the sword. They did not leave over a sword, or even leave over a soul. Now, when they say every man, I'm curious if this means that they actually did spare the women and children for the sake of you being, treasure, booty of war, or if they were all slain, because it says, as the Lord commanded Moses his servant, so did Moses command Joshua. So Joshua fulfilled what Moses was told to do, and that may just be the total annihilation with not any survivors. But nonetheless, he takes all the land, and he successfully has conquered a whole chunk from, as it says, all of the land in Goshen, all the land in the hills, the south country, the divided smooth mount that goes up to Seir, to Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon under Mount Hermon. All their kings he took and smote them and put them to death. And it says he made war a long time with all these kings. Not a city that made peace with the children of Israel, except for the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon, because they were smart. They went ahead and played the game. Now, also on the notes of the Gibeonites, I will say that even though they swore, there was an opportunity for them to let the Gibeonites be killed, because they said, we will never kill you. It's not the same as we will protect you also from your enemies necessarily, though that may have been the conditional accepted. But clearly, God has made peace with their arrangement with the Gibeonites. So, from here, he cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir to Anab, etc., destroyed all of them. The Anakim are only left in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. And then after it's all said and done, what does Joshua do? He divides up the land as promised for each inherited to the respective tribes. They have now received the land as an inheritance. And it says the land rested from war. So it was now done. No more warfare, no more conquest. Now on to chapter 12. Let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode. Verse 1. And these are the kings of the land whom the children of Israel smote and possessed their land on the other side of the Jordan toward the rising of the sun, from the river Arnon to Mount Hermon and all the plain on the east. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Cheshvan and ruled from Aroer, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, and the middle of the river, and over half Gilead, and from the river Yabok, which is the border of the children of Ammon, and the plain to the sea of Chinnerot on the east, and to the sea of the plain, the salt sea on the east, the way to Beth Hajeshimot, and from the south under the falls of Pisgah, and on the border of Og king of Bashan, of the remnant of the giants who dwelt at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and reigned in Mount Hermon, and in Salcah, and in all Bashan, to the border of the Gershurites, and of the Machatites, and half Gilead, the border of Sihon king of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel smote them, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave it for an inheritance to the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the children of Israel smote on this side of the Jordan on the west, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to the smooth divided mountain that goes up to Seir. And Joshua gave it to the tribes of Israel for an inheritance according to their divisions, in the mountains and in the valleys and in the plains and in the falls, and in the wilderness and in the south country, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The king of Jericho won, the king of Ai, that is beside Bethel, won. The king of Jerusalem won, the king of Hebron won. The king of Yarmut won, the king of Lachish won. The king of Eglon won, the king of Gezer won. The king of Debir won, the king of Geder won. The king of Hormah won, the king of Arad won. The king of Libnah won, the king of Adulam won. The king of Makedah won, the king of Bethel won. The king of Tapua won, the king of Hefer won. The king of Aphek won, the king of Lasharon won. The king of Madon won, the king of Hazor won. The king of Shimron Meron won, the king of Achshap won. The king of Tanakh won, the king of Megiddo won. The king of Kadesh won. The king of Yokneam of Carmel won. The king of Dor of the regions of Dor won. The king of the nations of Gilgal won. The king of Tirzah won. All the kings 31. There we have it. So this is the full record of the different kings that were slain or taken during the conquest of Israel, not just with Joshua and friends, but starting with Moses on the other side of the Jordan. So now we have a full picture of all the different kings that were taken. 31 in total. Interestingly, because of what Gibeon chose to do, they have the sole surviving kingdom within Israel. So the number would have been 32, but instead it's only 31. I'm curious if there's any significance to that, because it does seem kind of strange, or at least unique, that one group managed to play this game and now the number got rounded out at 31 instead of 32, and they are the sole surviving people among the conquest area. That is very interesting. But also, it's worth noting that they made themselves servants, because it did say that those who come to you in peace and do bend the knee, you can make them your servants. So there was nothing against that explicitly in the Torah that Moses gave them, so it worked out. But I find that really, really fascinating, just that 31 kings were taken. I guess I'll wrap up by bringing up some historical comparisons, as I sometimes like to do. I was recently learning about Philip II of Macedonia, and this is the father of Alexander the Great, and the number of battles that he engaged in his lifetime, and the number of conquests he had, and the many ways he went about doing so. The guy pretty much warred his entire life. Now, it said that Joshua went to war for a long time. It does say that. So, just for comparison's sake, 31 kings, that's 31 conquests. I mean, we heard about the ones that he took in just a day, but this is no small feat. For it to say that he went to war with them for a long time, this must not have been some quick overnight venture, nor just a quick matter of a year. It probably was a very long and drawn-out campaign of systematically eradicating all the different existing kingdoms inside of the land. That is quite something. Quite something. It also makes mention of where the Anakim are still allowed, so like Gaza and stuff like that. I think that's kind of interesting too. So it basically shows that their entire edict was, we're taking this particular land and we're wiping out the slate clean. We're not going beyond what we're planning here. So yeah, lots to think about, lots of interesting stuff there. Another example, right? So the conquest of the Mongols, I've talked about that before too. They just kept on moving further and further and further into what was essentially Eurasia, conquering from the Mongolian Empire into the steppe, moving east and moving west. They really moved in all directions, and they just kept on winning. It's crazy. And they had this argument. They would say that, we have a sort of mandate from God, because otherwise, why would we be successful? We're only successful because God lets us win. Otherwise, we'd be the losers. And you can't really argue with that mindset, because it's true, they were winning. Likewise, here we have Joshua and company winning constantly, and yet the one time that they went to war without God on their side, they lost. So I think it's extremely important that we have that one exception. And it's, the significance of glorifying God. So the guy who ended up causing that, who was, basically lost everything, his family was slaughtered, I actually think there's some merit to him doing that, because it glorified God in the end. And just as Joshua said, he says, glorify God by telling the truth. This guy, in doing so, yes, he was wiped out, but he was not erased from history. Additionally, what I think is really cool is that because he did that, this established that Joshua alone is not the reason they're winning, nor is it their numbers. No, they're winning because God is making them win, and they will lose without God. So if that sin did not happen, well, they might not have gained that level of confidence. Also worth noting, it says that when they returned to camp after going to war to protect the Gibeonites, nobody wet their tongue against, wet like a whetstone. Nobody talked bad about Joshua. Nobody had any weird statements. So, in other words, it shows that everybody was in unison, everybody agreed, everybody understood. God is on your side. God has chosen to accept Joshua as the leader. We need to stay with what we're doing, because we're going to win. So yeah. That's quite a bit to think about as well. Well, with that about summarizes everything for this week's, I would say, portion of the book of Yehoshua. I hope you found it interesting. That is chapter 10 through chapter 12. This is the end of warfare, at least for now. So that's definitely quite a campaign that he carried out. And again, it was all God leading the charge. You don't really have much room to argue when God is literally throwing stones from the sky and killing more people than you can. I think it's also very important to point out that the blood is not exactly on the hands of Joshua. And in other words, it's not that. Oh yeah, so there's two things to this. This was going to happen either way. The only rationale here is we have to accept that this massacre, the destruction of all these people, was guaranteed to happen. Partly because the fact that God did so with the meteor shower, that speaks to the fact that he can do this at any time. Sodom and Gomorrah, ladies and gentlemen, he has the power to do it. But instead, he's giving the command to the children of Israel so that they will do the job. In other words, they're acting as an instrument of God. And it also says that the enemy's heart was hardened, just like with Pharaoh. And, you could say, oh man, that's so unfair. God took away people's free will. He made them feel that way. What the heck? I thought we were supposed to have free will. The answer to that is they had free will up to that point. This was their punishment. The choices they made in the past are what got them to today. This was not the case for the people of Gibeon, who were able to secure their own safety by being dubious, but their duplicity was for a good cause in their case, and God allowed it to happen. Now, mind you, they didn't ask, hey, God, what do you think of these guys? Should we trust them? No, they took pity on them. And I think it was because also, I talked about this before, didn't God say don't spare these people? So why did they get away with this? I think because they were commanded as follows: be kind to the stranger, because you were a stranger in Egypt. By honoring this good, positive commandment, it was more powerful than the negative commandment of don't form alliances, don't make a covenant. In other words, the deed of being kind to the stranger is more significant than the edict saying, go kill those people. That is the message I'm choosing to take from this, seeing what happened and how God personally got involved in all these wars, but let that slide. I'm thinking it's because it was a test for Israel. What do we do without asking God for permission or his input? We choose to be kind to the stranger. We choose to say, we'll protect you, we'll take you into our ranks. Your story really resonates with us, and we as former slaves who left Egypt hear that you heard about our glorious God, and we are here to accept you. We choose to trust you. So I think there's a beauty in that innocence and that naivety that led to that mercy. And I think that is perhaps why God chose to let this happen, because again, God could easily step in and say, well, I don't approve of this, so here's a meteor shower to kill the people you're about to form an alliance with. Hey, I don't approve of this, so here's another set of plagues. Anytime, God could have said no, but he let the children of Israel act on their own, and he found what they did to be acceptable. Until next time, this has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast. Thanks for listening. I hope you'll tune in next time. And as always, until then, I leave you with these two words. Baruch Hashem.